Hello everyone, I'm Paul Edmiston, and this video will be a foundational primer on useful tools to consider when developing your web pages. We'll look into using private windows to our advantage, and then we'll have an introduction to developer tools and some of the most useful features within it. How do you view a web page as if you're visiting it for the first time? It's not always necessary to do this, but there are nuanced cases where it might be important to do so. Your history and cookies will affect what you see. For instance, once you have visited every linked page on your site, every link will show as if they have been visited. This link over here, for example, to the Mariana Trench Wikipedia entry, is normally a bright and vivid orange. But since I've visited the link's destination already, it will remain this dull orange instead. In this circumstance, however, I want to view every link as if I hadn't visited before. So how do I do this? A feature immediately available on all major browsers today is private browsing. Private browsing allows your browser's history, cookies, and cache to not be referenced, nor will it save any of them. You can view your pages as if you're visiting them for the first time, all the time. Your browser may refer to this mode with a different label. Google Chrome, for instance, calls this incognito. Chrome and Firefox otherwise use the same method to open a private browsing window. First, you're going to want to copy the URL to your web page. We're going to need it for later once we get to our private browsing window. Then you're going to want to click the drop-down menu towards the top right of your browser window. Within Firefox, this looks like a hamburger menu, whereas in Google Chrome, this looks like a set of ellipses. Then the option to start a private window should only be a few options away from the top. Private windows look visually distinct typically compared to normal windows, so it should be visually apparent if you have indeed opened a private window. From here, all we need to do is paste in that link we copied earlier to the address bar, and now we can view our website as if we're always viewing it for the first time. For example, you may notice now that link that I mentioned earlier that was already visited now shows that bright vivid orange as if it was an unvisited link. Because indeed, from the perspective of the browser history in private windows, it is an unvisited link. Sometimes you may want to make a one-off, temporary change to a page you're currently testing. Or maybe you need to look under the hood with the actual page side by side to debug an issue that's coming up. This is an instance to where the web developer tools will be useful. Developer tools, often also referred to as devtools or inspect element, is a feature immediately available to all major browsers. It allows you to examine your web page's HTML, CSS, and any programming code that may be present. It's a similar procedure between Google Chrome and Firefox to open the developer tools. Click the drop-down menu towards the top right of the browser window used for the private window earlier. Under More Tools, you should find an option for Developer Tools. It may look like a lot to take in at the start, but that's okay. You do not need to understand everything immediately for DevTools to be useful. In fact, we'll be focusing our attention towards one area and one area only of the DevTools in this demo. DevTool features across browsers are typically pretty similar. With some searching online, however, you can typically find some more specific instructions on how to use certain features of your browser's DevTools. For the purposes of this demo, I'll be using Firefox. It's what I personally use the most, and it's available on both Mac and PC. Before we continue on to features, however, consider pausing the video and exploring a bit yourself. Any changes you make to the settings of DevTools itself will be consistent, so do please be careful with those. But any changes you make to the page itself that you're viewing are non-destructive and will not be saved. For instance, let's say you do something scary here. Let's say you accidentally delete the whole header, or maybe you're looking at the styles and you hide everything completely and you're not too sure how to go forward. Well, if you do something scary like that and you're unsure how to reverse it, all you need to do is refresh your page and it will return to exactly how it was before. This lets you be bold with your experimenting, and it lets you try more involved ideas without it being a pain to reverse if things do go wrong. There are times when it's to your advantage to try doing things this way. Typically, devtools start docked to a side to let you view both your page and the tools on the same window. You might find different arrangements to your liking, however. On Firefox, click the ellipses menu towards the devtools top right. There are options to dock it on all sides or even to break it out as a separate window. It might also be useful to look at your devtools' options and see what interests you. There are typically some features that you might actually like, such as taking a screenshot of your whole page or setting the devtools color scheme. These sort of options are often tucked away in here for modifying. When you're looking through your page's HTML markup for a specific element on your page, it can be easy to get lost. Inspect Element allows you to jump right to where it is in your markup. Firefox gives you two options to access this tool: directly from DevTools or directly from the page. To access it from DevTools, click the icon towards the top left. It will look like a cursor over a button, and if you hover over it for a while, you may see that it's labeled as Pick an Element from the page. It will even give you the shortcut to access it directly. Click this button, then on the page, click on an element you would like to jump to on your markup. You'll then notice that it's highlighted within the markup section. Note that when you have this mode enabled, you don't have to worry about actually going to a link's destination. For instance, what if I were to click one of these nav menu buttons? Notice that I was able to click on a link element, and rather than activating the link, the element will be highlighted in the markup section. To inspect an element directly from the page, on the other hand, all you would need to do is right-click that element, then click Inspect. With a specific element selected, we can more closely consider the other panels that are typically found inside a browser's DevTools. This panel, for instance, would be the Rules panel. The Rules panel allows us to inspect CSS rules that apply to a selected element. You may notice that the broadest and most general rules are listed towards the bottom, and then towards the top are more precise rules that override those. Some browser DevTools may show rules from what is known as the user agent. These are default style rules that, if nothing else were set, are what your browser defaults to. Towards the top of the Rules panel, it's common to see some toggles for pseudo classes or for classes that you may already have baked into your HTML. On Firefox, for example, we can see toggles for the hover pseudo class and for classes that I've already established within the HTML markup. Within the Rules panel, you can also typically highlight elements that are selected by a given selector. If you want to modify your CSS style rules temporarily, you can click towards the top or bottom of the selector and add a property and value. You can also modify a pre-existing property or value to your liking. You can also even modify the HTML markup if you wanted to, although admittedly, editing your HTML markup within the DevTools is a little more cumbersome than it is with the CSS styling. The Layout panel focuses on how an element is positioned and displayed on your page. With the Layout panel, you can view how the element and its child items interact with Flexbox and Grid. Flexbox and Grid allow you to do some neat things with positioning, but they can be difficult concepts to wrap your head around. These visual tools will help it be a little bit easier to debug issues that come up from Flexbox and Grid. This Flex container with 3 child items is a good example. Both the Flexbox and the Grid visualizer often show not just how the container holds its contents, but how the contents inside interact with each other. The Layout panel also allows you to view how the box model is assembled for an element. The layout of the box model diagram is typically pretty similar from browser to browser. There are 5 elements to be interested in from the inside going out. The first one is the item itself in its own dimensions. Then is the padding spacing within an item, and then the established borders of it. Outside of that is the margin spacing that is outside of the item, and then the positioning, if such is used with relative positioned items. Properties that affect the box model and an element's display or position, such as box sizing or float, are also shown towards the bottom typically. If the Rules panel is every possible CSS style rule that selects an element, then the computed panel shows the stylistic end result that the user actually sees. You can typically fold out a computed style to find which rule ultimately rendered this style. Some browser devtools also allow you to see the computed styles from the user agent. If you have a hunch that the default styling is causing a specific behavior, this might be useful. Otherwise, it's often unnecessary. If you make any changes to the page's CSS styling anywhere in DevTools, they'll be displayed in the Changes panel. This may be useful if you've lost track of what you've added through DevTools and what was saved with the page. The browser will do its best to write a selector that you can then paste into your external style sheet or mirror the changes there. Note, however, that if your changes are on a specific element, the resulting selector may look pretty strange, and you'll be pretty much left on your own as to how to apply it to your style sheet. This video has been an introduction to some useful tools to consider when designing web pages. We looked into private windows and how they may be useful to simulate visiting a web page for the first time. Then we got a first look into developer tools, a powerful toolbox for web designers to take advantage of on all major browsers. Then we looked into some useful, common features that the dev tools on most browsers share, including inspect element, analyzing our CSS style rules, seeing how an element is displayed and positioned, what CSS styles an element currently has, and how to keep track of temporary changes we made. There are still more advanced tools to consider, even just within DevTools. Consider experimenting with tools that we haven't covered on your own. A lot of changes you may make are non-destructive, and clearing mishaps is just a refresh away. I'm Paul Edmiston, and thank you very much for watching.